Como sigo creyendo en ti, mar, tu horizonte no es.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rudy Vargas, and I am the coordinator of Undocumented Student Services and the Dreamer Engagement Program at the University of Northern Colorado. Thank you all for attending this collaboration between the Cesar Chavez Cultural Center, Motus Theater, and the Dreamer Engagement Program in support of our Dreamer Month 2021. Additionally, I'd like to express our appreciation to all members of Motus Theater and our readers, UNC's President, Dr. Andy Feinstein, and District 6's Director of Cultural Excellence and Parent Engagement, Jesse Tijerina. Thank you all for your willingness to participate. We host this event because we believe it is important to give a voice to those who have been silenced for years as a result of systemic oppression and because of fear of deportation for not having a lawful status. According to the Pew Research Center, there were 10.5 million individuals with an undocumented status in the US in 2017. Not having a lawful status prevents those persons from obtaining basic services that most of us can easily access. Barriers such as the inability to apply for jobs, limited access to healthcare services, or no access to federal aid for college make it hard for those to thrive, and instead they often live to survive. However, the resiliency of individuals with an undocumented status is unparalleled. According to Forward.us, despite the barriers, nearly $2 billion are contributed by Dreamers to Social Security annually. 96% of Dreamers are either working or in school. 6% of Dreamers have launched their own business, and 14% of Dreamers have purchased their own home, and they pay an estimated $380 million just in property taxes every single year. At UNC, our students often attend school to obtain degrees in fields such as nursing, human services, and criminal justice, and most have the mentality of graduating to give back to their communities. We have also celebrated 16 graduates in the last year, and many of them are back on campus working on their graduate degrees. Additionally, our Club for Dreamers and Allies, Caminando Unidos, recently received an award from Centennial Voices for their constant work supporting those in need. With the help of our community and support from different offices and organizations on campus, we will do our best to ensure seeing many more Dreamer students succeed and graduate in upcoming semesters. Please follow us on Instagram or Facebook, or check our website to stay up to date with updates and events hosted by our program. And let us know if we can ever be of support. I'll pass the microphone to members of Motus Theater and let them take over. But before I do, I'd like to thank you all once again for attending this event. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much, Rudy. We're so excited to be here. A big, huge thank you to the Dreamer Engagement Program and Undocumented Student Services and the Cesar Chavez Cultural Center at UNC. And of course, all of our UndocuAmerica and general operating funders for their generous support of this program. We couldn't do it without all of you. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Just want to say that although we're gathering from the comfort of our homes, we do want to honor that Motus Theater is coming to you live from Colorado, which stands on the land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and the Ute. I also want to acknowledge that we're all probably processing a lot of pain, anxiety, trauma, and emotions due to COVID-19, racism, ongoing challenges to democracy, and health and economic fears. So let's go ahead and take 3 collective deep breaths while we reflect in our mind on something we're each grateful for. Ready? Inhale. The second time. And the last time. Thank you so much. I'm always surprised by how amazing it is to just take a few deep breaths. As Rudy said, my name is Tania Chairez. I am an undocumented immigrant. I am a monologuist in Motus Theater's UndocuAmerica series and the National Outreach and Education Director for Motus Theater, where we create original theater to facilitate dialogue on critical issues of our time. We use the power of art to build alliances across diverse segments of our community. And tonight, we're incredibly excited to share with you stories from our UndocuAmerica tour. We will be sharing 4 UndocuAmerica monologues that will help us more deeply understand the impact of immigration policy and the lives of undocumented people so that we can reflect and take action. They were created in a Motus monologue workshop in collaboration with Motus's artistic director, Kirsten Wilson, who's running tech behind the scenes. One of Motus's strategies for the UndocuAmerica tour to strengthen our community and our country is to present allied performances called Shoebox Stories, where we ask people, often in positions of public leadership in our communities and our country, to stand in the shoes of an undocumented Motus monologist and read their story aloud. The readers don't need to agree with everything they read in the story. They just need to be willing to suspend judgment, model courageous empathy, and see the world for a moment through someone else's eyes. Tonight, you will hear University of Northern Colorado President Andrew Feinstein, as well as School District 6's Director of Cultural Excellence and Parent Engagement, Jesse Tijerina. Both of them will model civic hospitality and deep listening by stepping into the shoes of two Motus monologists, Armando Penice and myself, by reading aloud our stories. After the reading, they will reflect together with us on the impact of reading our stories. And we will also have two Motus undocumented monologists, Kiara Chavez and Alejandro Fuentes Mena, read their own stories. I want to go ahead and welcome our singer and songwriter, Elisa Garcia, who has chosen short musical responses in between each monologue that she hopes will allow us to feel more fully the sorrows, the hopes, and dreams of the monologists, as well as all of our own aspirations for justice as a community and as a country. We offer this music as restorative medicine, so we hope that when she sings, you will know she is singing directly for each of you, and she will actually start by singing Motus's theme song from Shoebox Stories by Carlos Heredia that honors our time together today.
Thank you. Just for a moment, take a walk in my shoes, feel the weight of my burden, see the world as I do. Maybe then we'll find a way to live a life where each can say, I respect who you are. Take a moment to refrain from any judgment and my pain and hold my story for a while. Si puedes por un momento caminar mi camino, sentir el peso de mi carga y ver el mundo como yo. Así vamos a encontrar la manera de hablar y decir, yo te respeto. Toma un momento sin rencor, sin todo el juicio y el dolor. Ten mi historia por un tiempo. If you could just for a moment let me walk in your shoes. Feel the weight of your burden and live the life that you do. Neighbor, then I'll understand. Despite our difference, shake your hand and now respect who you are. I take this moment to refrain from any judgment and your pain and hold your story for a while. If you could just for a moment take a walk in my shoes.
Thank Thank you so much, Elisa.
Thank you.
And now, without further ado, I want to welcome Motus monologist Kiara Chavez.
Hello, thank you, Elisa. Indeed, that was so beautiful. And thank you to the Motus team and to everyone at UNC for having us. I feel incredibly honored and grateful to be here. I used to work for Motus and I haven't been back in this little world for a while, so I'm really, really happy to be here. And to all of the dreamers and everyone who's an ally celebrating Dreamer Month, thank you for joining us as well. Again, incredibly honored. I don't know what else I could say. I think being a dreamer is one of the biggest identities I hold. And although it has been very difficult for me in various ways and has brought me a lot of pain, I trust that all of it was for a bigger purpose in my life. And so I'm incredibly grateful and I wouldn't take it back for anything. And so I hope most of us can embrace our identities in that way and just look to the future with a lot of hope and with a lot of love and respect for our communities and building ourselves up. So thank you for having me. And now I will read my autobiographical monologue entitled Returning Home. The longest plane ride of my life was for a trip to Mexico when I was 19. So a little over 4 years ago now. I don't remember packing. I don't remember the drive to the airport. I don't remember much about all the forms I had to fill out or how much my family had to pay to apply for advanced parole, the program that used to allow DACA recipients to leave the country for study abroad, employment, or as in my case, a humanitarian reason. My grandma was having surgery and she needed someone who could care for her as she recovered. I don't remember much about the conversations with my worried parents about the dangers of me traveling. You see, although advanced parole granted me permission from the US government to lawfully leave the country, it didn't actually guarantee that I would be let back in. Spoiler alert, I made it back. What I remember most is being on the plane because I'll never forget how my heart beat faster the closer we got to taking off. The plane was going to Puerto Vallarta. I'm actually from Colima, but they don't have a direct flight from Denver, and this is one of the closest airports. So you can imagine I was surrounded by American tourists ready for vacation. Meanwhile, I sat there just about vibrating from nervousness or excitement. I'm not sure which. Either way, I just wanted to vomit. But luckily for the tourists on that flight, the knot growing in my throat kept holding it down. Other people on the plane were chatting, making last-minute phone calls, getting out their reading material, and I was having a complete nervous breakdown. My hands sweating, my breathing fast, my whole body shaking. When I finally heard the pilot say we were heading out and the plane began to move, my mind started racing. I couldn't stop thinking about what my life had consisted of the past 15 years since I crossed the border at age 4 and left my first home. All the nights as a child, crying in my parents' arms, asking, why can't I go back to see my family? Why, Mama? Why? All the calls to my grandmas and the long kisses I would send them over the phone, hoping they would somehow reach them all the way from Denver to Colima. all the pictures of the beaches, my grandparents, and the aunts and uncles who I once knew so well. Now getting older, photograph by photograph, having an entirely different life without me. As a child, I didn't understand why I couldn't go to Mexico, and still, I trusted that it was something I simply couldn't do. But now, somehow, at age 19, I was returning, and my heart was just about to burst. I remember when the plane finally sped across the runway and lifted off into the air. I began crying with abandon, as if I was completely alone. Just me, launching into flight, somehow through both space and time. In my head, I kept hearing my grandma's voices, the way they used to soothe me over the phone when I was little. Mija, please don't cry. God willing, we will hold one another soon. Please, don't cry anymore. Those phone calls were so painful because I could hear them, but I couldn't hold them, touch them, smell their hair. My older sister could go to Mexico. She's an American citizen who was born in the US when my father was working in California. Every few years during our childhood, she would get on a plane to Mexico and return with sweets from my aunt's candy store and a collection of photos of her smiling next to my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and the cousins who I had never met. But I simply couldn't return. That was the rule, because I was born in Mexico. My sister could enroll in the best private schools in Denver and attend on scholarship. And I was smart too and tested in as well, but I couldn't go because as an undocumented person, I wasn't eligible for the financial aid, and there was no way my parents could afford the tuition. My high school classmates could fly to Europe and study the art I loved and strive to imitate with my own brush, but I couldn't join them. To see the frescoes and the ancient columns, because another DACA student had tried and they didn't let her back into the country. Instead, she and her whole family were deported. I had spent my whole life reconciling myself to the solidity of barriers between me and my dreams, and the invisible borders between me and what I loved. But now, suddenly, I was flying over 500 miles an hour, straight through the biggest and the most painful barrier of them all, between me and my family. I just kept thinking, is this real life? It can't be. Can I actually believe this is true? When so many of my dreams have been thwarted at the last minute, is it really true that I'll be landing in Mexico and seeing my family? It can't be. But now, for the first time on that plane, I could see it was actually coming true. And I was sobbing again, like my 4-year-old self, picturing my grandmothers, thinking, I'm making it to their arms and they're still alive. We are alive. Midway through the flight, still shaking, I began to become aware again that there were others still on the plane. I managed to wipe my tears and smile, finally excited. I laughed at myself, thinking, wow, they must think I'm crazy or really scared of flying. But how could they ever understand the magnitude of this moment in my life? I'm fulfilling the American immigrant's dream. My dream. I'm seeing my family. After 15 years. And I wanted to yell it across the aisles and tell the whole plane what a triumphant day they were a part of. It's real. It's real. I'm returning to see my family, meet my family, the lineage of people whose love and existence has filled my veins with blood and my belly with culture. I'm gonna set my feet on the dirt I was molded from and breathe the humid air my lungs were meant to breathe. I'm fulfilling the prophecy my mom commenced when she threw my umbilical cord on top of the house that my father and my grandfather built because she truly believed it would one day bring me back home. I, Kiara Jocelyn Chavez Garcia, I'm returning home. I'm returning to myself. On that long ride back to Colima, for those hours of anticipation, my dreams were finally in my own hands, and I could touch them, feel them, smell them. The years of pain and rejection hardly mattered, as the millions of kisses I had sent that way were finally coming in for a landing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiara. And now Elisa Garcia will sing her musical response to Kiara's story. Please share a few thoughts in the Zoom chat or in the Facebook Live comments about what most impacted you as you heard Kiara's story. Here's Elisa.
Gracias a la Vida is a song about giving thanks to life. Thanks to life that has given me eyes to see. It has given me feet to march, my beating heart, the fruit of the human brain, and my song, which is your song, and everyone's song, which is my song. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio dos luceros que cuando los abro perfecto distingo dicha de quebranto y en el alto cielo su fondo estrellado y en las multitudes el hombre que yo amo. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado la marcha de mis pies cansados, con ellos anduve ciudades y charcos, playas y desiertos, montañas y llanos, y la casa tuya, tu calle y tu patio. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio el corazón que agita su marco cuando miro el fruto del cerebro humano, cuando miro el bueno tan lejos del malo, cuando miro el fondo de tus ojos claros. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado la risa y me ha dado el llanto. Así yo disfruto elementos materiales que forman mi canto y el canto de ustedes que es el mismo canto y el canto de todos que es mi propio canto. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida.
Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.
And now, Motus monologuist Alejandro Fuentes Mena reading his story, Deport Me.
I was just a kid when I realized what being undocumented meant. At age 8, I started going to work with my dad so I could help him rebuild the entire outside of other people's homes, all the while not having a real home of our own. Clients would see his strength in Spanish, his lack of English and documented status, and give him about half the value for the work. And that is who my father believed he was, half the man I thought he was, half the value of any other. I witnessed as my mother would leave for an entire weekend, 72 hours, to take care of someone else's family. She was lured with the promise of being paid over $300 for her work, but she would come back with only $100 in her pocket. All those rich families saw little value in everything my mom did. The money they paid was barely enough to put food on the table. It didn't cover the worry my mom had because she couldn't be home to take care of us when we were sick, help us with our homework, comfort us when we returned to an empty home. $100 for a whole weekend away from her family, like she was worthless? But don't you understand that she was priceless to me? Well, spending my weekends without my mom as she cared for other people's children, and spending those weekends working for my dad for free so he wouldn't lose the money for the privilege of building a home for someone else's family, and witnessing this over and over and over again, I began to think that maybe I wasn't worth much either. Despite the fact that I had been recognized at school as gifted and talented, despite the fact that I was a math whiz, learned English, a completely unknown language, in less than a year, and that I was an engaged student, I let those weekends of feeling worthless affect me. I began making jokes rather than making plans for my future, playing games rather than paying attention, chasing girls rather than chasing my dreams. And like all self-fulfilling prophecies, I got to the point where my grades reflected what society said my parents and I were worth: half-priced human beings. But luckily, I had a teacher who worked hard to remind me of my value and helped convince me that what this society was telling me and my family was wrong. With her support and that of many others, I got myself out of that pit of self-deprecation, past the insecurities, past the hate, past the negativity, past that half version of me, into a good college and into a position where I am now an educator who teaches math. And like my mentors, I teach young children their value, because all children are valuable just as you and I are valuable. As a teacher, I can't help myself. Let me take you to school for a few moments. Hope you're good with that. Let's start off with a little math lesson. My father is one man, one of the hardest workers I know. My mother is one woman, one of the strongest and most compassionate individuals in my life. My sister is one daughter, a brat, but a lovable one, and an American citizen. And I am one son, half of this country and half of Chile. And we are four whole, beautiful gifts, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, not the half-priced individuals that society has attempted to make us. Moving to applied math and economics. If this country continues to deport the undocumented community, it is missing out on courageous, strong, intelligent, family-loving, hardworking people of great value. And that's not only our loss, it's your loss to miss out on us. Not to mention the billions in taxes we bring in every year, which is billions more than large corporations are paying. Lastly, moving beyond math to ethics, paying an undocumented person half the value of their work, extracting all you can get from them to build your homes and take care of your families, and then deporting them as if they had not brought value, is not just mathematically flawed. It's an American math story problem gone wrong. It is criminal to treat us as subservient and less desirable. I'm living in this country undocumented, teaching your children, supporting them, engaging their minds in math and in their dreams. I'm 100% here and 100% committed to this country in which I was raised. This country that constantly seeks to spit me out. Lose me, and you lose my value. Not just the money I pay in taxes and Social Security that I will never benefit from, but you lose my ability to inspire, connect, and engage. You lose my ability to bring an impact, and you lose the knowledge I bring to my students who are your children. This country would be foolish to lose me. Deport me. Deport me. But in the end, it's your loss.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. And now Elisa Garcia will sing her musical response to Alejandro's story. And go ahead and do the same thing of sharing a few thoughts in the Zoom chat or in the Facebook Live comments about what most impacted you as you heard Alejandro's story. Here's Elisa.
When the night has come and the land is dark y la luna es la luz que brilla ante mí. Miedo no tendré, no, I won't. Te asustaré just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Junto a mí, junto a mí. Y aunque las montañas o el cielo caiga, no voy a preocuparme, porque sé que tú estás junto a mí. No lloraré, no lloraré, oh, I won't shed a tear, porque sé que tú estás junto a mí. And darling, darling, stand by me, oh, stand by me. Stand by me, stand by me.
Thank you, Elisa. You're so amazing.
Thank you.
And now, Motus monologuist Armando Penice, who will introduce his reader.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Like Tanya said, my name is Armando Penice. I'm an UndocuMonologist with Motus Theater. I'm also an aspiring writer for children's books, so they're coming out soon, hopefully. My other cool job is working at the Denver Public Library, where I do a lot of family, teen, and kid programming. I connect a lot of resources to the public. I'm also a proud parent, and I'm super thankful that you're all here to celebrate Dreamer Awareness Month. And now I have the pleasure to introduce Andrew Feinstein, the president of the University of Colorado, who will be reading aloud my autobiographical monologue entitled "This Beautiful Dark Brown Skin."
Thank you so much, Armando. It's an honor to be here tonight and be a part of this incredible evening. I've learned so much already and looking forward to hearing more from all of you as the evening progresses. And now I will read Armando Penice's monologue entitled "This Beautiful Dark Brown Skin." Like many Latinos, I have a huge family. Unfortunately, I never get to see most of them because they are on the other side of the US border with Mexico. My family in the US, I can count on my fingers. A few uncles, my dad, my brother, and sisters. Thankfully, I've always been fortunate to have wonderful friends who I see as my family. That's why in the 7th grade, when my dad decided to move us to a different neighborhood, I chose to remain in the same middle school to stay with my old friends. Hanging out with my friends during lunch and sitting next to my secret crush in a math class seemed like a no-brainer, but it made for my trip to school to be a long one. I had my routine down though. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., catch the first bus at 6:15, arrive at the second bus stop at 6:45, and hope I didn't have to chafe after that bus. If I made it to the corner of Kentucky and Federal by 7:15 a.m., I was good. I could take a deep breath. That meant I had time to stop at the convenience store and grab a cup of hot cocoa, maybe play a couple of arcade games before school. Talk about a warm-up. I'm winning against hordes of zombies before even starting my school day. Yep, no pop quiz was ever bigger than that. After school on nice days, I would skip the second bus and just walk. My dad would still be at work when I came home, and my sister and father after school activities, so I was in no hurry to get back to an empty house. On my way home, I would use the concrete dividers on the sidewalk as measures and take time to practice my music lessons for cello. Each step I made on the sidewalk was a note. I would walk and count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. For longer sections, I would count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. For shorter sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I had my music teacher in my head telling me, "Come on, Armando, stay on the beat, stay on the beat." So one day, I'm happily counting along, looking down at my concrete measures, when I see blue and red lights flashing across the sidewalk. And I hear an angry voice yelling at me, "Stop, freeze." I was totally confused. I might fight video game zombies, but I was just a kid, barely old enough to sit in the front seat of a car. And here are 2 police officers coming at me, hands on their guns, yelling. I was freaking out. Like, what did I do wrong? My mind was going through a mess of different emotions. Because as an undocumented person, the last thing you want to do, the very, very last thing, is to get in trouble. Even a simple traffic violation can lead to deportation. So I'm thinking, what did I do? What could it have been? Did I forget to pay the bus driver? But no way, I remember paying David. He gave me a transfer, and he would never call the cops, even if I did forget. The officers were yelling at me to turn around and put my hands up. I was struggling to understand what was going on when the second officer physically spun me around, stuck his hands into my pockets, and started pulling everything out. My gum, the coins left from the arcade, my bus transfer, my student ID. He yanked my arms tight behind my back and handcuffed me. I was in shock, totally confused and terrified. And then, with some kind of kid logic, I thought, it's my hair. My family didn't have money for regular haircuts, so I cut my own hair, which, as you can imagine with a 12-year-old, it didn't work out so well. I would always end up using the number 4 clipper to get rid of the patches. But at least it was even. No, I thought, it can't be my hair. Then they searched every pocket in my backpack, dumping out my school books. They were looking for something they couldn't find, and that's when it hit me. They stopped me because of the color of my skin. They think I'm some criminal. I can't believe they're doing this. What if they take me to jail and my dad has to come get me? Will he need an ID? Could they deport my dad? The officers pushed me down, grabbed my student ID, and went back to their car, leaving me on the street handcuffed. It took about 20 minutes to run my ID through some database. And while I sat on the curb, all these cars were going by with people looking at me, pointing at me, like I stole something or robbed somebody. They assumed the officers were making the city safer for them, stopping a thief. I'm a kid in handcuffs, sitting on the curb, and I wanted to get up and yell, "Stop! I'm the victim here. I didn't do anything. Let me go. I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything." And I can't explain to you, even now, how humiliated and ashamed I felt sitting there with everyone going by, pointing at me, looking at me, thinking I was some type of criminal. Finally, the officers came out of their car. They threw my stuff into my backpack and uncuffed me. One handed me my ID and said the most ironic thing I've ever heard: "Stay out of trouble." No apology, nothing. When all along, I wasn't the trouble, they were. I remember it taking me a long time to pull myself together, to even figure out which way was home. But I did make it home. And like many other days, there was no one there, no one I could talk to. Instinctively, I grabbed my soccer ball and went to an elementary school a few blocks away where I often played. There was no field, but there was a baseball cage where I would sometimes practice my shots. I stayed there until evening, kicking the soccer ball over and over again against the metal cage, taking out my anger and shame on that ball until my foot couldn't take the pain anymore. I often wonder how many other brown and black kids go through this stuff. pulled over, harassed by the police with no way to channel the fear, the anger, and the humiliation. How many undocumented kids go through this stuff and have no one at home to talk to? No shoulder to cry on, no soccer ball, because we start to serve a life sentence away from our families as soon as we cross that border. I'm a man now, watching another man, our former president, tell the citizens of this country that if you're an undocumented Mexican, you must be in a dangerous gang, a rapist, a murderer. Can I be safe walking home from my job at the library, where more and more Americans view people who look like me as a threat? Even more importantly, is my 9-year-old son going to look like a bad guy to a couple of officers? Will my neighbors see me for who I am? A young father hurrying to pick up his son from school so that he doesn't have to walk into an empty house? Or am I their worst nightmare, like some zombie that must be stopped? And this beautiful dark skin you see that people are being taught is a threat to this country is the rich brown tone I inherited from my grandfather. And let me tell you, my grandfather is the best person I have ever known. No matter how poor he would always house and feed people. Before he turned to religion, he was so patriotic that even when the national anthem was played on the radio, he would stand up. And he loved his grandkids so much, he would wake up extra early to walk miles to a place in Mexico that gave out free milk at 5 a.m. So despite our poverty, we had what we needed to grow strong. Across that invisible border, my grandfather is a person I've missed the most. And because I'm undocumented, I never got a chance to go back and say goodbye to him. So when you see someone with this beautiful, dark, brown skin walking down the street, I hope you think of my strong, kind-hearted Mexican grandfather. And I hope you will think of me. And I hope you think of my beautiful son and help me keep him safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Feinstein. And now Elisa Garcia will sing her musical response to Armando's story, and you will continue to share your responses to the story in the chat. Thank you.
So in a world where most everything can be bought, this song says, you can't buy the wind, the sun, the rain. You can't buy the clouds, the colors. You can't buy my joy or my pain. Tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar el sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor, tú no puedes comprar las nubes, tú no puedes comprar los colores, tú no puedes comprar mi alegría, tú no puedes comprar mis dolores, tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar el sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor, tú no puedes comprar las nubes, tú no puedes comprar los colores, tú
cosas de la vida no se compran, mi amor.
Thank you so much, Elisa.
Thank you.
And now it's actually my monologue's turn. I will just say on a personal note that I'm super excited that my story will be read aloud today. I am an educator, and in my previous role, I used to work with college students also at the University of Northern Colorado and many others. So I'm really excited to be here and to have a lot of young people hopefully listening. And now I want to welcome School District 6's Director of Cultural Excellence and Parent Engagement, Jesse Tijerina, who will read aloud the final monologue of the evening, my own story, titled Listen to Your Heart.
Thank you, Tanya. I'd just like to thank UNC and Motus Theater for giving me this opportunity. I feel honored and blessed to share this space and be given the permission to read this beautiful and courageous story. And now I'll be reading Tanya Chaitis' story, Listen to Your Heart. I often hear that the only way to get people to care about my struggles as an undocumented woman is to ask them to imagine me as their daughter or sister. But I have my own family, and my mere humanity deserves respect. I was taught at school in this country that my contributions to society are all that should matter. So I've done everything in my power to be at the top of my class, get into a good college, volunteer, work hard, pay taxes to prove that I am worthy. And I am worthy, with or without all that effort. Even though I often get treated quite literally like an alien or a criminal, simply because I don't have an official document calling me a citizen. I also want you to know that I am proud of my Mexican identity, although it took almost 2 decades for me to embrace. From ages 5 to 18, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, a place where an anti-immigrant sheriff named Joseph Arpaio ruled. He put undocumented Mexican immigrants in chain gang shackles, making the men wear pink underwear to humiliate them. He literally celebrated spending less money on his inmates than on his dog. And how? And somehow, this was acceptable. I grew up constantly striving to prove that I wasn't dirty, lazy, criminal, or shameful, that I wasn't worth less than a dog. I now finally have a sense of my own value. So to feel my life under attack and have most people do nothing in response, it's as if humanity doesn't matter. And that baffles me. It is inconceivable that the very ground under my feet is falling away and I could be deported, put into a detention center, separated from my family, lose my job, my mortgage, and all I've built. And yet somehow, you, my friends, neighbors, people at the coffee shop, the grocery store, and you listening to my story right now might not see my situation as urgent enough to get up and do something about it. My entire community of documented and undocumented people is under attack everywhere, left and right, day after day. And it seems most people think they've done their jobs simply by liking my article on Facebook. Sad crying face, maybe even angry face. People think they've done enough by staying caught up on the news so they have something to lament at the dinner table. My life is not a talking point. My life is not something to uplift a liberal agenda. And don't you dare pity me or send me prayers. Do something. Call your senator, your immigrant phobic family. Show up at an immigrant rights meeting, because every day of inaction is another day the status quo prevails. And the status quo is painful. even if I still have my family intact, because it hurts physically, emotionally, and mentally, that most citizens don't care enough to give their time and effort to help me and their fellow human beings. Because while you are going about your business as usual, trying to keep up with work, deadlines, health goals, and reflecting on your next gratitude post, those of us on the front lines of anti-immigrant attacks are fighting against the limited hours in a day. Because there's never enough time to work our 60-hour-a-week jobs and then go to meeting after meeting, plan events, protests, fundraisers, and teach-ins, pouring our energy from what quickly becomes an empty cup. But somehow, at the same time, it's still the job of the undocumented community to educate citizens on how our life depends on your voice, your vote, your money, and your willingness to show up. It's not like we enjoy the fact that we need you, but we do. And I am exhausted from pulling your weight and begging you to act like a citizen in a democracy. And because most people aren't pulling their weight, my mental health is suffering. I need rest too. But right now, I'm afraid that if I don't go to that extra meeting, if I don't share that petition, if I don't convince everyone that this is urgent, then more people will get deported, sometimes sent to their death, and another family will be torn apart. You see, it's urgent for us all the time. And someplace deep inside, you must know it's urgent too. You must. So please, just for a moment, pause. Breathe. Can you hear my words? I'm afraid. I'm afraid that in the end, no matter how much I have fought for others, I won't be able to save my own family from deportation. Have you seen the pictures from our borders? Innocent families with young children and elders tear gassed for seeking refuge? Do you know what is happening across our country? Hardworking immigrants, good parents like mine, locked away like criminals in detention centers. Young children separated from their parents in these terrible tent camps are exposed to abuse and dying from dehydration and untreated infections. Do you see a war? Do you see at least a semblance to concentration camps? Can you feel your own heart telling you it is urgent? Please listen to your heart, not just for me or for the undocumented community, but for your own humanity too. Please, it's urgent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, for stepping into my shoes. And now Elisa will sing her musical response to my story, and you will all share a few thoughts in the Zoom chat about what impacted you about hearing Jesse Tijerina read aloud my story.
Solo le pido a Dios, I only ask God that I'm not indifferent to pain, to injustice, to the future.
Solo le pido a Dios que el dolor no me sea indiferente, que la reseca muerte no me encuentre vacía y sola sin haber hecho lo suficiente. Que la reseca muerte no me encuentre vacía y sola sin haber hecho
Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.
That song gets me every time.
Your powerful monologue gets me every time. Everyone's monologue is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Your music has been just amazing. Thank you for gracing us with your inspiration to keep us moving towards justice. And of course, to the monologists for sharing your truth to transform the immigration system. And to our guest readers, President Feinstein and Director Tijerina, who modeled civic hospitality by deeply listening and reading the words of people whose life was impacted by the immigration system. I would like to start with a few questions for our readers, particularly. What most impacted you as you read our stories aloud? And maybe we can start with President Feinstein.
You know, it was very moving for me, very powerful. I was trying to assimilate and absorb the power of the story while I was actually saying it. It was an experience I've never had in my life. And it's hard for me to explain it unless you've actually been able to be a part of something like this. It was a mix of emotions, empathy, understanding, wanting to learn more about Armando. Emotion. It was hard for me to keep my emotions out of the story because it was such a raw and impactful experience that he had.
Jesse, would you like to go next?
I'm like Dr. Feinstein. It's the processing is going to take a little while, right? It just it's a great reminder of the importance to lean into culture and to lean into shared spaces, to do your best to go beyond just that sympathetic piece, and as Dr. Feinstein mentioned, the empathetic area, and ultimately the goal is that we have a certain unity that creates a community among all of us, and that shared understanding that it's not so much that what we do as a whole, but what we do as an individual in real time to interrupt the racial and the xenophobic injustices that exist among our community and among our country. So as I've seen in some of the chats, it is a call to action, and how important that commitment is from all of us to honor the experiences not only of you all, but of your folks. What about their story? So again, I'm honored and I'm blessed. Brown and blessed to be brown this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. And Armando and I will actually answer the same. So Armando, maybe you can start us off. What most impacted you in having your story read aloud today?
Thank you, Tanya. So I think Dr. Feinstein did a great job holding my story. I could tell from the beginning that he was excited about reading it. And I could tell it touched his heart because he held it with a lot of emotion. Like all his words had deep emotion with them. And they filled my heart with happiness because it meant that we are doing the right thing by being here, which is sharing the immigrant stories. I know that is one of Motus Theater's missions, to change the narrative of the immigrant in this country. And, like we're trying to show that we have these stories and we are people, normal people who are just trying to exercise our most basic right, which is our right to live. So I want to thank Dr. Feinstein for reading it and holding it so deep in his heart and for letting it breathe with such emotion.
Thanks, Armando. And I mean, similarly, it's really incredible to have someone else step into my shoes. And thank you so much, Jesse, for really taking my story and reading it aloud for everyone. It's weird to see it read back to me because then I can also sort of have this out of body experience as well, where I'm like, oh my gosh, someone went through that. Oh wait, that was me. And so I really appreciate you sort of providing that mirror back to me, because then I can reflect on my own journey as well. Thank you. And this conversation will continue. I will have a moment to do a Q&A with the audience as well. But for the meantime, those of you listening will actually see a poll sort of pop up on your screen asking you the level of impact of hearing the stories. You can go ahead and take a moment to submit the answer. And while you do that, I'll highlight that there were so many beautiful comments in the chat, and I won't read all of them, but I will say just a few words about each section. I know that for Kiara's monologue, some of the comments really highlighted the triumph of her return home and the strength of her roots. For Alejandro, I saw some comments highlighting what a big sacrifice that his family took and the amazing commitment that he's made to all of his students. For Armando's story, they highlighted the immoral and illegal detention by police and the hopes for a better future for his son. And for myself, I mean, of course, the call to action, the urgency to do something. Thank you all for seeing that and sharing all of those in the chat. And now we're going to move on into a short Q&A where you can put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A feature preferably. For your questions for Dr. Feinstein, for Jesse Tijerina, for Kiara Chavez, for Armando Penice, and for myself. And I'll start us off with one question for our readers. How do you hold these stories and the stories of others like us as leaders in these educational systems and in the Greeley community? And we'll start with Jesse first.
That's a big question.
I know.
I think it's for me, it's around really creating genuine and authentic spaces where folks can be heard, right? And in the times where you know, there's not that opportunity or the space might not be safe, is to, on my behalf, do my best to honor that and share that voice as best I can. You know, not only as an ally or an advocate to the work, but most importantly as an accomplice to the work. I do believe that it's a collective work and push forward. You know, I look at it as marching every day for folks. And as long as I stay rooted in that ground and listen to learn rather than listen to respond, I believe I'll be the best informed I can to hopefully create those safe spaces. And as you said, Armando, is you know, tell the story to change the narrative. You know, so again, it's an honor. Thank you.
What about you, Dr. Feinstein?
Can I say ditto? No,
Yes.
you know, how do I hold these stories? I mean, they were all so personal, so emotionally filled. I went through a gamut of emotions from sadness to frustration to anger. And, you know, for a very brief moment, I had a small glimpse in what it must like to have been Armando on that day, on the curb with handcuffs on him. Terrifying. And, you know, I think as an educator, as a president of a university, you know, my job, besides leading the institution, is to always be a learner, always be learning, growing as a human being. I'm so blessed and fortunate to have that opportunity in my job. And also it provides me chances like this to experience these really personal stories and share them in such a unique way that touched me so deeply that I'm thankful for being a part of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you. And I know that for our audience, sometimes it helps to have a lot more facts and information about the immigration system and even more information about how you can be agents for change. So we thought it would be important to share a link in the chat with some action items and lots of information about how immigrants are really part of the solution to the fight against COVID-19. And so you'll find that link in the chat to this document with all the information. And again, if you have questions, you can start putting them into the Q&A feature or the chat. And I know that oftentimes people are wondering, for our monologists, what was the process like for creating the monologues, and how did we get here, right? Like, what was it like?
I'll go first with that question. So the process to coming up with the one monologue, I often think back on it because it was very healing, and it was also a reminder of why mental health should be talked about more in our communities. Because as we were coming up with this one experience, we had to uncover a very deep chest of other stories that we lived through. So it was a few month process, and we were just in a safe space with the other UndocuMonologists, and we were sharing stories from our past and things that happened to us that we decided to lock up and never open again. But here we were, and we were sharing and talking about them, and like reliving those scars. And it was a rough patch. We would write them, we would talk about them, and then I remember for myself, the following days I was a mess emotionally. I was like, oh my god, like I felt like it had just happened to me, So it was those mix of emotions, because it was that feeling, but also it felt really good and healing to share in a safe space and let them out and be like, here's my story and here's who I am, and have other people also share their stories, and have that relation where like I can know what Tanya and Kiara are going through, because I've been there. So it was something that I didn't know was needed in my life, and now I'm just glad I get to share it, and have wonderful people like our readers today who take that chance to step into our shoes and be ourselves for a moment, and then hopefully share those stories with more people across your life.
Armando, you're a great writer, and the story you wrote was so vivid, such an expressive story.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the comment, and as you did a wonderful job with like how I talked about the passion that you put into it, because it made me picture it all over again in a good way. Not that I was reliving the trauma, but it helped me picture it, even though it came from me. I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but that's what happened.
I understand.
Thanks, y'all. There's a lot of questions popping in, so I'll combine two that I see right now that I think could kind of go together. How can our educational systems do a better job of stepping up to serve undocumented students and their families? And even more specifically for Dr. Feinstein, what is the University of Northern Colorado willing to do to push for much needed immigration reform?
That's a big question. I think, some of the work that we're already doing at UNC, and I'll give you an example of that. Some of the federal relief that came, the coronavirus federal relief funding that came, basically excluded our dreamers from that. And that was wrong. I mean, we had basically at the university decided to fund that internally ourselves to ensure that our undocumented students had the same kind of resources and support that other students on campus did. And I think that was a very important move for us, also, showcased where our priorities are by the way in which we're investing in our students. And as I think I've heard from others here, use our voice. These like perfect examples of what we're doing tonight, sharing these stories, using our voice, lobbying and advocating to our state and federal senators and representatives about the importance of the work that we're doing to support all of our students at the university.
Thank you. Jesse, do you want to speak for, for a school district?
Very similar, just to ensure that there are spaces that are safe where the truth can be shared. And on the other end also is to be very explicit around our educators and really truly have those conscious conversations of the role that xenophobia and race play into the informed decisions that we make. And that, although we may have the greatest intent in the world, it could still have an unfavorable impact to certain communities. And, to truly have an understanding, as that Maya Angelou quote says, know better and do better. I think we all know better, right? But I think we need to do a better job to commit to doing better, intentionally, and continue, as Dr. Feinstein said, is to share that through voice and speak that truth.
And know that I'm an ally. And you can come see me, you can come to my office, you can call me, let me know how I can help personally.
Thank you both. And for our audience, if you're curious as to like federal language around like campuses that are super friendly towards undocumented communities, you can check out the National Immigration Law Center. They have some beautiful outlines of different policies, as well as some local organizations that also do some of that work, like Colorado Schools Resist and Keeping the Dream Alive. There's another question. There's a few questions that are sort of asking to the monologuists, how do you feel when you share your monologues? And is it different when you sort of go through the process? And I think I'll also add in the other question so we could sort of do them together, which is, what piece of advice would you give to younger individuals who may hold this status and often feel lost?
I can take it on since I've been silent. I would say that I mostly feel very similar as I read my monologue in some sense, because it's, as Armando mentioned, very much kind of like reliving a specific moment in your life. And so I always think of myself on the plane and I always feel those emotions again. And, it's something that I don't think about daily because it's not an exciting moment in my life. Well, it was exciting to go back, but that particular part in the plane is like crazy to me. So when I read it, I feel all of that again. And it's just crazy, but also I've grown so much since the first time I read that monologue. And so I do always reflect on that and how much I have changed as a person. And so that does kind of help me see, wow, I'm not that little kid in the plane anymore. In some ways I am, but now I can be more of a resource to my community and I'm not stuck in my head anymore. And I would say that in terms of being in different places, I would say that I feel different. Especially like the first time I shared my monologue, I think it was insanely scary because prior to that, I really tried to hide my identity as an undocumented person. And so coming out to strangers and telling them, hey, I'm undocumented, was insanely scary. And then as I started to grow out of that, it depended on the community I'm with. Like today, I feel super safe knowing that I'm talking to dreamers, and that's people who are celebrating dreamers, and that makes me feel safe. But so my advice to younger individuals who hold this status and feel lost is that there are going to be so many people who politicize your existence because you're an immigrant, and for whatever reason in our society right now they don't have space for us and whatnot, and it's blue versus red and everything that goes with that. But I would encourage you to try to find yourself, whatever that means, because we're all different. Definitely, as Armando mentioned, we went through this process and it was deeply healing. So find what will be healing for you. And I would recommend highly therapy. And so going through therapy, speaking to an expert, speaking to somebody who is able to understand you and reflect back with you and not judge you and hold space for you. That's so important. And then from there, just being able to like find your community and fail and try everything and fail and figure out who you are without this identity and what other people are trying to tell you that you are, so that you can feel empowered and you can show up to a space and say, no, it doesn't matter what you think. Here's who I am and here's what I'm going to be in this moment. So that's my advice.
All right, I'll add a couple things real quick because I know we're running out of time, and I wanted to also answer. But yeah, like Kiara mentioned, I also feel like the story of the monologue is the same, but the people who are reading it and the people who are even on the chat make it a little bit unique for me, and it kind of gives a different direction to the room every time we read it. So I very much appreciate that about each performance, and each performance that we do, like I want to be like 100% energy, because it's I take it, and it's also, going with that healing vibe. Every one of these is very healing, and it's work that needs to be done. For the question that about what would we tell the young individuals who may hold this status, I would say, don't fall into the trap that you're alone, because I know even myself, at times growing up without status, there was so many times where I was so close to depression because I felt like I had no opportunity, no one to talk to. It's rough seeing friends have all these opportunities and going to colleges and doing all this stuff, and like Kara talks about in her monologue, like traveling, and we're not able to do that. Like our families living their lives without us. It's hard to see, and just try to find comfort in knowing that there's people like us, like yourself, out there, and find those communities. And we're definitely a resource too. You can always reach out to us and connect with us, and even just to talk, but you're definitely not alone. So my hope is that you never get to that place, and if you do, just know that we're here for you.
Thank you all. I feel like both Kiara and Armando really covered everything, so I won't add to that question. But I will say that our youth and our young people are the most powerful people, and you all have within you what it takes to be strong against all adversity, whether it's political or whatever, right? Like, politicians can say whatever they want about undocumented people, but we know we are strong and we are resilient. So I appreciate you all for being here. Thank you for your questions. I know that there would be so many more questions if we kept going, but I want to make sure that we stay on time. So I do want to thank again President Feinstein and Director Tijerina, who stood in our shoes today, our Motus monologuists, Kiara Chavez, Alejandro Fuentes Mena, and Armando Penice, for sharing your stories, and Motus's powerful contributing artists, including Motus Theater's Artistic Director, Kirsten Wilson, and singer Elisa Garcia. Thank you so much to our audience for welcoming us to your space today. If you're able, please consider donating to Motus Theater so we can continue our strategic work. I think we'll put a link in the chat where you can find out how to do that. And we hope that you'll visit our website so you can find out how you can share these stories even further, as well as information about Motus's Shoebox Stories Podcast, where we have guest readers like feminist icon Gloria Steinem, who read Kiara's story. We have the co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, who read Armando's story. And we have anchor Maria Hinojosa read aloud my story, as well as lots of other really amazing humans. So thank you so much for checking that out. And those of you joining us on Zoom will actually have your emails added to our mailing list so that you can join us in future performances, as well as receive an actual link to today's performance that you can then share with your friends, family, etc. And a survey link so that you can share some feedback with Motus Theater. So that is it for us. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great rest of your evening, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Tu horizonte no es tu